The streets of Braavos were quiet, except for the soft splash of water under the moon pool. The house of black and white stood still, like it always had, cold and strange. Inside, Arya Stark was no longer Arya. She was still learning to become no one, but deep inside she hadn't really let go of who she was. She still dreamed of Winterfell sometimes. Her father's smile, her brothers fighting with wooden swords, her mother's warm hugs. But every time she opened her eyes, she reminded herself, those dreams were dangerous. The faceless men didn't allow personal feelings. Jaqen Hagar watched her silently like he always did. That morning he told her, "A girl has done well. A girl has no name. A girl is ready for her first true face." Arya didn't smile. She didn't need to. She only nodded. Inside her heart, a small part of Arya Stark died that day. But she kept walking. Her first real kill came 2 weeks later. A merchant who sold poison to children in the poor parts of Braavos. She watched him for days, studying his moves, his patterns. She listened to the cries of mothers whose babies died after buying his medicine. When the time came, she poisoned his wine and stood in the shadows, watching him fall to the floor, gasping. People screamed. Some ran, others stared. Arya just turned around and walked away, her heart silent. Back at the house of black and white, Jaqen nodded. A gift was given. Well done. Arya cleaned her blade, washed her hands, and slept without dreams. But something was changing. As weeks turned into months, Arya became colder. She stopped whispering her list at night. The names faded from her memory. Cersei, the Mountain, Walder Frey, even Sansa's name felt distant. She couldn't remember her voice anymore. Winterfell became just a word, a place that existed in another life. One night she was sent to kill a lord visiting Braavos from Westeros. He had wronged the many-faced god, they said. Arya followed him, wearing the face of a servant. But when she saw him clearly for the first time, her breath caught. He had once served House Lannister. He was at the Red Wedding. Blood rushed to her head. She wanted to scream, to stab him right there and then. But she didn't. That wasn't her mission. She was no one. But that night she didn't sleep. She sat near the pool, watching her reflection in the dark water. "What am I becoming?" she whispered to herself. Jaqen appeared behind her as if from the shadows. "A girl is becoming no one. But what if I don't want to be no one?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Once a girl chooses this path, there is no return." Arya looked down. She thought about Jon, about Needle buried under the stone, about Nymeria lost somewhere in the wild, about all the things she had left behind. But she also thought of what she had become, quick, deadly, quiet as a shadow. She was no longer afraid. Not of lords, not of death. She was powerful, and sometimes power felt better than belonging. So Arya stayed, not because she forgot who she was, but because she believed that revenge needed patience and power. As years passed, Arya became one of the most feared and whispered names in the shadows of Essos. No one knew her face, but many feared the cold wind that followed her. Winter had come, but Arya Stark had chosen a colder path. Arya moved like a ghost through the streets of Braavos now. The people called her many names: the Shadow Girl, the Silent Hand, the Stranger's Daughter. But no one truly knew her, not even herself. Years had passed. Her face had changed more times than she could remember. She wore the skin of old women, young girls, tired men, beggars and noble ladies. Each time she put on a new face, she felt herself slipping away. Like Arya Stark was just a story she once heard long ago, around a fire. But some things couldn't be forgotten. No matter how many faces you wore, one night, as she returned from a mission, a quiet killing in the theatre district, she passed a group of Westerosi travelers in the docks. She didn't pay attention at first, but then she heard a voice. King in the North now, they say. Jon Snow the bastard took Winterfell back from the Boltons. Arya froze. Her heart hit her ribs like a war hammer. She turned slowly, her face blank, her body calm, but inside her mind was spinning. Jon is alive. Jon has Winterfell. She hadn't heard anything from Westeros in months. The faceless men didn't care about kingdoms and wars. But Arya did. She followed the travelers, listening from shadows. She learned that Ramsay Bolton was dead, that Sansa was at Winterfell too, that the war was not over, but winter was truly here. That night, Arya didn't return to the House of Black and White. She sat alone on a rooftop, staring at the moon. Her fingers touched the scar on her stomach, where the waif once stabbed her. That pain, that fight had changed her. But so had everything since. She whispered to the night, "Why am I still here?" The truth hit her hard. It wasn't just revenge anymore. She liked the silence. The control, the power of deciding who lives and who dies. In Braavos, she had become something no one could touch, not even the gods. She had learned death like a language, spoken it with her blade. But Jon, Sansa, Winterfell, her family was still breathing. Her blood was still out there. The next morning she returned to the House of Black and White and stood before Jaqen H'ghar. "I want to leave," she said simply. Jaqen tilted his head. "A girl cannot choose both paths." "I'm not a girl anymore," Arya said. "I'm not no one. I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell. I never stopped being her." For a moment, silence. Then Jaqen walked toward her and looked into her eyes. "A girl has learned all that she can. A girl has paid her debt. But if she leaves, she can never return." Arya nodded. "Good. I don't want to." He smiled faintly, as if he had been waiting for this day all along. She returned to the place where she had hidden Needle. It was still there, wrapped in cloth under the stone, untouched by time. When she held it again, something inside her heart burned with warmth, like touching a piece of her soul. But things weren't so simple. The faceless men didn't take betrayal kindly. The first warning came the day after. She booked passage back to Westeros. A sailor on the ship she chose was found dead in his cabin, face sliced clean off. Arya knew that was no message. That was a hunt. They had sent someone for her, one of their own, a new face, a new killer. She didn't know who it was, man or woman, young or old. That was the danger of the faceless men. Anyone could wear death like a mask. But Arya Stark was not a frightened little girl anymore. She walked with Needle at her side. She slept with one eye open. She poisoned her own food to train herself again. She expected betrayal from every glance. Then it came. On her last night in Braavos, as she waited at the docks, a man approached her. Limp in one leg, bent back, smiling kindly. "A coin for the ferry?" he asked. Arya's eyes narrowed. She stabbed him before he even blinked, but he laughed as he died. "Not me," he whispered. Then from the crowd, a woman in a red dress leapt forward with a dagger. Arya barely turned in time, the blade slicing her arm instead of her throat. They rolled on the ground. The crowd screamed. She saw the woman's face shift, flicker between three different ones, and Arya stabbed deep into her side. When it was over, Arya stood over the body, bleeding, shaking, but alive. She looked up at the sky. A storm was coming, both outside and inside her soul. She had taken her first step back to Westeros, but death was already following. The ship to Westeros rocked gently as it cut through the cold grey sea. Arya sat alone near the bow, wrapping a piece of cloth around her injured arm. The stab wound still throbbed. The faceless woman had gotten close, too close. If Arya hadn't trusted her instincts, she would have died before even leaving Braavos. But she was alive. Bloody and bruised, yes, but alive. The sailors gave her space. They didn't ask who she was. Something about the way she moved, the quiet steps, the way her eyes searched every shadow, made them keep their distance. They could feel it. Death followed her like a second shadow. She spent most of the journey in silence, sharpening Needle, thinking about Jon, about Sansa, about Winterfell. But her mind always returned to one thing. The faceless men weren't finished. They didn't just let people go. She had broken the rules, left the order, spilled the blood of one of their own. She knew how they worked. They were patient, quiet, and they never stopped until the debt was paid in full. One morning, as the ship neared Blackwater Bay, the captain approached her. "Storm's coming," he said, nodding toward the sky. "We'll stop outside King's Landing till it passes." Arya didn't like that. King's Landing was still dangerous. The Lannisters might have lost power, but the city was still full of rats in golden cloaks and knives in smiling hands. She wanted to go straight north to Winterfell, to her family, to safety. But fate had other plans. That night lightning cracked across the sky. The ship dropped anchor near the shore, but the crew stayed on board, too scared to dock in the middle of a storm. Arya stood alone on the deck, her cloak soaked, her eyes staring at the lights of King's Landing in the distance. And then she saw him, a man on the ship, not part of the crew, just standing there. At the far end of the deck, near the ropes, Arya's body tensed. She hadn't seen him before. His face was plain, too plain, like a face picked out of a drawer. She moved slowly, hand on needle. The man didn't move. Just smiled. "A name was taken," he said. "Now the price must be paid." Arya didn't answer. She struck fast, slashing through the air, but the man dodged like smoke. He spun behind her, tried to grab her neck, but she dropped and rolled, the storm hiding their movements from the crew. They fought in silence. Only the wind and thunder. Screamed. Arya stabbed forward, missed. He kicked her back. She hit the mast, but she had trained for this. She wasn't the little girl who ran from the waif. She was the ghost of Braavos now, when he came in for the kill. She slid behind him and sliced his leg. He dropped. She didn't hesitate, drove needle through his chest. The man gasped, and for a moment his face shimmered, turned into someone else's, a different man. Then a third. Arya stepped back, heart pounding. She whispered, "I already paid. I gave you years of my life. You don't own me anymore." The man coughed blood and whispered back, "But death owns everyone." He died with a strange, peaceful smile on his face. Arya dragged the body to the edge of the ship and dropped it into the sea. It vanished into the stormy waves. Back in her small cabin, she sat in silence, hands shaking. She knew this wasn't the end. The faceless men would come again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day. She could never truly outrun them, but she had made her choice, and she would face the price, if that's what it took to see her family again. 2 days later, Arya arrived at the gates of Winterfell. She wore a simple cloak. Her hair was shorter now, her face older, harder. The guards didn't recognize her. They laughed when she said, "Tell Lady Sansa that her sister Arya has returned." "She's dead," one of them scoffed. "Arya Stark died years ago." Arya only smiled. "Then go tell her a ghost has come home." Moments later, the gates opened. Sansa stood there in a grey cloak, her hair braided like their mother used to wear. Her eyes widened when she saw Arya. At first neither said anything. Then Sansa whispered, "Is it really you?" Arya nodded. They embraced, and for the first time in years, Arya felt something warm inside her chest. Home. But even as the snow fell softly around them, even as the walls of Winterfell wrapped around her like a blanket, she knew. The shadows of Braavos were not finished with her yet. Winterfell smelled different now. Not like the place Arya remembered as a child, full of smoke, bread, and snow. Now it carried the scent of war, of cold steel, blood in the stone, and old memories buried under too much pain, but it was still home. Sansa had changed too. She walked like a queen now, spoke like a ruler, and kept her face calm even when her heart was unsure. But when Arya hugged her, she felt her sister's fingers shake for just a moment, a silent crack in her armor. "I thought you were dead," Sansa whispered. "I thought I was too," Arya replied. Jon was away, fighting White Walkers beyond the wall. Brienne of Tarth stood guard like a silent mountain. The northern lords respected Sansa, but Arya could see it in their eyes. Some of them didn't trust her. Not fully. Not yet. Arya didn't care. She wasn't here for their respect. She was here because her blood ran through these halls, because her father's bones still rested in the crypts, because her mother's screams still echoed in her nightmares. But peace didn't last long. A few days after Arya's return, a stable boy was found dead in the courtyard. No wounds, just gone, like his soul had been sucked out. His face was stiff, frozen in fear. At first they blamed the cold, or maybe the rats, but Arya knew better. She had seen that kind of death before. That night she went to the crypts alone. She stood before her father's tomb, the cold creeping into her boots. She whispered, "They've followed me here, haven't they?" She heard a whisper behind her. A girl broke the rules. A vase must be taken. Arya spun around. No one was there, just shadows, but she wasn't scared. Not anymore. She returned to her room and dug deep into her old pack. Inside, wrapped tightly in leather, was a small pouch. Black coin, sharp powder, a piece of cloth soaked in scentless poison. Tools of the faceless men. She had kept them, just in case. That same night she walked the halls of Winterfell in silence, eyes watching, ears open. She wasn't Arya anymore. She was a shadow again, a wolf in a world that had forgotten how to fear her. She found the second body near the kitchens. A cook, same expression, same frozen face, no blood, no struggle, and worse, no tracks. Whoever was doing this wasn't just good. They were one of her own. She went to Sansa, told her everything, but Sansa didn't believe her. "Not fully? You think one of your faceless men followed you here?" "To Winterfell." Arya nodded. "Yes, and they won't stop," Sansa frowned. "Then what do we do?" Arya stared out the window, watching the snow fall. "We don't wait for them to strike. We find them first." And so she began the hunt. Every night Arya moved through the castle like smoke. She watched servants, soldiers, even lords. Looked for small signs, a limp that wasn't there the day before. A voice that changed too slightly, eyes that didn't blink enough. Then she found it. A woman sweeping the great hall, old, bent back. Moved too slowly for someone whose hands were calloused like a fighter. Arya followed her, watched her sneak through secret passageways, down to the cellars, into the dark. And there she changed her face. Arya stepped forward, quiet as breath. The woman turned, now wearing the face of a young man. But Arya didn't blink. "You shouldn't have come," Arya said. The man smiled. "You brought death here. We only followed." Arya drew needle. "Then let's finish it here." The fight was fast, sharp, violent. They crashed into barrels, sliced through hanging meats. Blood painted the walls. The assassin was good, fast like lightning, but Arya was faster. She knew every trick he knew. She had trained with the same god. In the end, she shoved him against the stone wall and whispered, "This is for the girl I used to be." And then she slid needle through his throat. The body crumpled. The face changed 3 times before settling into nothing. Arya stood there, panting, blood on her face. Sansa found her minutes later. She looked at the body. Then at Arya. Arya just said, "I told you. They came for me." Sansa nodded slowly. "Are there more?" Arya didn't answer. She didn't know. But as she looked around the cold stone cellar, she felt something deep in her gut. This war wasn't over. Not with the White Walkers. Not with the faceless men. Not even with herself. Because the scariest thing about becoming a monster is realizing you kind of like it. After the body was burned, silence returned to Winterfell. But it wasn't the comforting kind. It was the silence you feel right before something terrible happens. Arya stood alone on the outer wall that night, watching the cold wind roll over the north. Her hands were still stained red. She hadn't washed the blood off. She wasn't sure if it was out of pride or guilt. Sansa had tightened security across the castle. She ordered double guards, locked the gates at night, and told the Maesters to keep records of everyone inside the walls. But she didn't say a word to the people about what really happened. "Panic will do more damage than knives," she had said. Arya agreed, but she also knew the truth couldn't hide forever. The faceless men would not give up. One body wasn't the end, it was a message. They wanted her to know. She could run, she could hide, she could even kill one of them. But the House of Black and White never forgave. And it never forgot. 2 nights later, the next message came. A face, laid neatly on her bed. It wasn't just a stranger's, it was Gendry's. Arya stared at it, her hands trembling. For a moment, her mind refused to believe it. She thought it was a trick, a copy, a fake, but she knew it wasn't. The cut behind the ear, the small scar above the eyebrow. The half-smile that never faded, even in death. Her heart dropped like a stone. Her knees gave way. She sat on the floor, holding the face in her hands like a broken memory. Sansa burst into the room minutes later, after Arya didn't respond to the knock. She saw the face and froze. Oh, gods! They found him, Arya whispered. He was in Storm's End. He was safe. Sansa didn't know what to say. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed strong. She knelt beside Arya. Why are they doing this? Arya didn't answer right away. Then she looked at her sister and said quietly, "Because I left them. Because I tried to keep my name when I should have lost it." Sansa placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll fight them." Arya shook her head slowly. "You can't fight shadows, Sansa. You can only become one, or be swallowed by them." That night, Arya didn't sleep. She sat at the edge of the bed, staring at Gendry's face until the candle burned out. Then she wrapped it gently in cloth and buried it under the heart tree in the godswood. The red leaves fell around her like blood drops. She whispered, "I'm sorry." But the gods didn't answer. After that, Arya changed. She walked the halls with dead eyes. She barely spoke. She started training again, harder than ever. Sansa watched with growing worry. It was like Arya had returned from Braavos, but now she was slipping back into it, deeper than before. Brienne noticed it too. "She's becoming someone else," Brienne said one day. "Someone I don't recognize." Sansa replied, "No, she's becoming who she was forced to be." The worst part came when Arya started seeing them in her dreams, not the faceless men, but the faces. Faces she had worn, faces she had taken, faces she had killed. They whispered to her in the night, "You owe us. You chose this. You can't be Arya Stark and no one too." She woke up screaming once, clutching her knife, nearly stabbing the servant who had come to light her fire. The walls were closing in. She could feel it. Then Jon returned, covered in frost, tired, scarred from war, but alive. The moment he saw Arya, his eyes lit up like they hadn't in years. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. "You're home," he whispered, but Arya just stood there, frozen, because in that moment she realized something. She wasn't home, not really. Winterfell was her blood, her family, her bones, but her soul. Her soul had been claimed in Braavos. It still belonged to the many-faced god. Jon looked at her face, concerned. "What happened to you, Arya?" She didn't know how to answer, because the truth was too heavy to speak, so she smiled, just a little, and whispered, "I'm still figuring that out." But deep down, she knew. The girl who left Winterfell all those years ago never came back. Jon had noticed it right away. Something was wrong with Arya. Her body was here, yes, but her spirit, it was somewhere else. Somewhere darker. At dinner, she barely ate. She didn't laugh. She didn't even look him in the eye. Sansa tried to hide the tension, but it sat heavy on the table like another guest. Bran was quiet as usual, but even he kept glancing at Arya, like he knew something wasn't right. Then Jon saw the scar on her arm. He reached across the table and gently touched her sleeve. "What happened to you?" Arya pulled away without answering. Jon gave her a look. "Arya talked to me, but she just stood up and left." Later that night, Jon followed her to the godswood. She stood under the heart tree, her head tilted up, eyes closed. The snow was falling slow and soft, like it respected the silence she carried. "I've seen war, Arya," Jon said behind her. "Real war. Against the dead. Against the cold. But nothing scares me more than watching you act like you're already gone." Arya turned her head, her voice low. "Maybe I am." Jon walked closer. "Then let me bring you back." She looked at him now. Her eyes were tired, not just from sleepless nights, from carrying too many faces, too many deaths, too many secrets. "I didn't come back for peace, Jon," she said. "I came back because I didn't want to die with nothing left. But even here, I don't feel whole." Jon stepped closer. "Why? What happened to you in Braavos?" Arya looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I lost myself. I gave up my name, my past, my family. For what? To learn how to kill? To take faces like prizes?" She paused. "They promised me freedom, but they just gave me another kind of chain." Jon's jaw tightened. "Did they follow you here?" Arya hesitated, then nodded. "They already took Gendry, and they won't stop. John's face turned cold. Then we fight them. No, she said sharply. You can't fight shadows. Not like this. They don't come in armies. They come in whispers, disguises. They could be anyone. John looked at her like he was seeing a different version of his little sister. A harder, sharper version. One that bled ice. So what then? He asked. Arya didn't answer, because she didn't know. The next day, things got worse. Maester Vulcan was found dead in the rookery. His face sliced clean off. The ravens all released into the sky, flapping wildly. Dozens of blackbirds screeched through Winterfell's halls like omens, and with the Maester gone, the north was cut off. No letters, no messages, no warnings. They're isolating us, Arya said to Sansa and Jon in the war room. It's how the faceless men work. Quiet kills, spread fear, then disappear. But why now? Sansa asked. Why not before? Why follow you all this way just to play games? Arya met her sister's eyes. Because I left. And I left with knowledge I wasn't supposed to have. Jon narrowed his eyes. What kind of knowledge? Arya hesitated. Then finally she said it. There's something deeper than the faceless men. Something under the house of black and white. A place even they fear. A room with no doors, no windows. Just whispers. Just faces. I was never meant to see it. But I did. Jon and Sansa looked at each other, unsure if they believed her. Arya continued. They don't just train killers, Jon. They serve something older. Something nameless. That's why they need me dead. Not just because I left, but because I know. Jon stepped forward. Then we protect you. But Arya shook her head. You can't protect me from this. The only thing that will stop them is if I return. Sansa stood. You're not going back. You just got home. Arya looked at them both. A war in her eyes. If I stay, more people will die. They won't stop at Gendry, or the Maester, or some servant in the hall. Eventually they'll come for you. Jon stepped closer. Then let them try. We'll stand together. We're Starks. But Arya looked away. She didn't want to say it, didn't want to admit it, but she wasn't sure she was a Stark anymore. That night, she sat on the wall again, watching the dark sky stretch forever. She held Needle in her hand, but it didn't feel like hers anymore. Too light, too innocent, too full of memories she couldn't return to. Then a whisper on the wind, not words, just breath, just warning. She turned around sharply. No one there, but she could feel it. They were already inside, not the castle, inside her. Snow fell harder the next morning. The white covered everything in Winterfell, the stone walls, the training grounds, the stables, like it was trying to erase the blood. But blood doesn't hide under snow. Not for long. Arya stood in the great hall, staring at the long wooden table. There were 3 faces laid across it, not masks, faces, real ones. The guards who stood night watch, all 3 of them dead. No wounds, no sounds in the night. They were just there now, laid out like a gift, or a message. Jon stared at them, fists clenched. Sansa turned away and swallowed back a gag. Arya didn't blink. They're in the walls, she said calmly. Jon turned. How? We've doubled guards. Locked every gate. You don't understand, Arya said. They don't use doors. They don't walk in like men. They slip in like air. Like smoke, Sansa shook her head. Then what are we supposed to do? Watch each other die? Arya didn't answer, because part of her didn't know. Part of her wasn't even sure if this was still real. She started hearing whispers, not just in the night, but during the day, in the hallways, in the godswood, in the rooms no one entered. They said things she didn't want to remember. Valar Morghulis, do you still remember how to kneel? She betrayed the many-faced god. You took the gift, but didn't pay the price. Arya clutched her head, trying to block it out, but it wasn't just voices. It was faces. Every time she passed a mirror or a polished blade, she saw something wrong. A flicker. A stranger's eye in her reflection. A smile that wasn't hers. A face that changed for just a second, then went back. She stopped looking into her own reflection altogether, and when she slept, if she slept, she dreamed of the Hall of Faces. But in her dreams, the faces moved. They opened their mouths, screamed without sound, cried blood, and always one face in the center. Her own, but not how she looked now. her child face. Arya Stark at 10 years old, innocent, terrified, mouth sewn shut. One night, she woke up in the crypts. She didn't remember walking there. She was barefoot, bleeding, and standing in front of her father's tomb. In her hand was needle, but it wasn't clean. It was wet with blood. She turned around and saw a body behind her, a guard, eyes wide open, mouth open, throat slit clean. She stared at her hands, her blade, her feet covered in snow and red, and she whispered, "I didn't do this." But the shadows didn't answer. She dragged the body to the fire pits before the sun came up, burned it in silence, and returned to her chambers. When Jon saw her the next day, he stepped back. He didn't say anything at first. Then finally, "Arya, is it still you?" She looked up, her eyes bloodshot, face pale, hand shaking, and she said the most honest thing she'd said in days. "I don't know anymore. Sansa called a meeting that night. Jon, Brienne, Braavos, Arya. No servants, no guards, just them. She laid it all on the table. "This can't go on," Sansa said. "Winterfell is falling apart from the inside. We're losing people. We're losing control," Jon agreed. "We need to find the source and kill it, once and for all." Brienne, ever the knight, offered to guard Arya every hour of the day, but Arya looked at all of them and said, "It's not someone outside. It's inside me." Silence. They stared. Arya continued, "They're not just here to kill me. They're here to pull me back, piece by piece, memory by memory, until I'm not Arya anymore." Jon looked pained. "Then we fight it." "You can't," she said, "because it's not a thing. It's not a man with a knife. It's a god. The many-faced god doesn't send armies. He just waits. Waits for your mind to crack," Sansa whispered. "So what do we do?" Arya stood up slowly. "I need to end it before it ends me." Brienne frowned. "You mean leave?" Arya shook her head. "No, I mean go back." Jon stood. "Absolutely not. I have to," Arya said. "The only way to kill the shadows is to walk into them." Jon grabbed her wrist. "You're not going alone," Arya smiled. Not kindly, not softly, but like someone who had already made peace with her own death. "You won't find me if I go." And she walked out. No one followed her, because deep down, they all felt it too. Arya Stark was almost gone, and something else was taking her place. The blizzard hit that night. Snow came down in sheets, covering Winterfell in white silence. Fires struggled to stay alive. Guards huddled near torches. Horses kicked in their stables, sensing something wrong in the air, and Arya was gone. She had taken nothing with her. No food, no supplies, no map. Only needle. And the black coin she once swore she would never use again. She left it behind, placed gently on her pillow. Valar Morghulis. All men must die. And now maybe Arya too. She walked alone through the woods, wind slashing her face, snow sticking to her eyelashes like frostbite. But she didn't stop, not when her boots froze, not when her fingers bled. Not even when she heard the wolves howling behind her. Not Ghost, not Nymeria, just wild ones, hungry and lost like her. Somewhere deep in the woods she found it, a tree unlike the others. Black bark, no leaves. Dead, but still standing, and beneath it, a pool of water that had not frozen. It shimmered like glass, like a mirror. Arya stepped toward it, drawn by something ancient, something she had never spoken aloud. A voice. Not from outside, but inside her own skull. "You want peace?" It whispered. She knelt at the edge, looked into the water. Her reflection didn't match her movements. It blinked when she didn't, smiled when she frowned. And then it changed to her child face, then to her father's, then to Sansa's, Jon's, Gendry's, Jaqen H'ghar's. Finally, it became no one, a face with no features. Just nothing, the reflection spoke. Her own voice, but hollow. "You killed for revenge, for duty, for training. But you never gave the one thing we asked for." Arya gritted her teeth. "I gave everything." "No," the voice said. "You gave blood." "Not your name," Arya screamed. "I am Arya Stark of Winterfell." The wind howled back, then silence, and then the reflection smiled. That's when she felt it, pain deep and sharp, splitting her chest like a blade from within. She dropped to her knees, gasping. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breath turned white, then stopped. For a moment, Everything went black, and then she opened her eyes, but it wasn't the forest anymore. She stood inside the Hall of Faces, again. The walls rose high around her, thousands of faces staring down, whispering, breathing. The torches were lit, but she had lit none of them, and at the center of the room, a man stood, Jaqen Hagar. He smiled. "Welcome home." "Girl!" Arya stepped forward, furious. "This is a trick." "No," he said softly. "This is your truth." She looked down at her hands. Her skin was changing. Becoming pale, translucent. She was fading, becoming no one. She screamed and lunged at Jaqen, driving needles straight into his chest. But he didn't flinch. He simply vanished into mist. Then dozens of other figures stepped forward, all wearing her face. Child. Arya, bloody Arya, Braavos Arya, merciless. Arya. All of them stared. "You were never meant to leave," they whispered together. "You belong to the many-faced god." Arya collapsed. Tears hit the floor, and then a voice, small, quiet, but clear. "No." She stood, again shaking, weak, but her voice stronger than it had been in days. "I may have worn your faces. I may have followed your rules. I may have become death." She reached into her coat, pulled out something, needle, the only part of her that had never changed. "But this is me." She sliced across her palm. Blood hit the floor. "I'm not no one. I never was. I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell, of the North, of wolves, and I choose my face." The ground cracked. The faces on the wall screamed. 1,000 wails at once. The room shook. Then light. Blinding white light. Arya woke up, gasping, back in the snow. Back at the Black Tree. Her hand still bleeding, the pool frozen now, above her, Ghost, beside her, Jon. He had followed her, found her. He lifted her up, his face pale with fear. "Arya, what happened?" She looked at him, smiled, tired, broken. "But Arya, I killed a god," she whispered. Jon didn't understand. He didn't ask, he just held her. Back in Winterfell, they said Arya changed after that. Softer but quieter. She stopped training. Stopped whispering names at night, stopped walking alone, but her eyes still held shadows. She never wore another face again, and when someone asked her what happened out there in the forest, she only said, "I remembered who I was," and that was the end of the ghost of Braavos and the return of Arya Stark.